Hi, it's really nice to be here. I'm Caroline Bell. I'm a consultant psychiatrist. I work at the Anxiety Disorders Unit here in Christchurch and part of the Canterbury District Health Board. And I'm involved in coordinating the psychosocial response to the earthquakes. So hence I'm here today. And what I wanted to do was really think about what the responses that we've had to the earthquake are. And understanding that in terms of what's happening to us and the people that we're seeing and our families and our friends and our colleagues. So this very much isn't a kind of them and us situation. We are all right in this together. And I think it's really important that we've got an understanding of what's going on for all of us. So first of all, I'm going to look at explaining why we've all got the responses that we have at the moment. And then thinking about what we're likely to see over the next months, because this is going to go on for a very long time. Talking about what the research of disasters tells us, because there is actually quite a lot out there from disasters internationally that we can learn from. Emphasising that we all need to work together with this, that this isn't different groups working in isolation. For it to work across the community, we've got to be all in this together and communicating really clearly with each other. And we need to probably be much more flexible and accessible and innovative than we've ever been before. And that's difficult considering the situation we're in, but it's actually quite exciting as well. And I've actually really enjoyed that aspect of all this. And then I want to spend some time as well talking about this, looking after ourselves. So ourselves as individuals in all this, ourselves as workers in all this, because if we fall over, everyone falls over as well. So it really isn't just words, this, it's really, really important. Right, so when we're thinking about the earthquake and the responses to it, there's things we need to consider in this. So it was, of course, a natural disaster. And in terms of research and as disasters go, outcomes from traumatic experiences are generally better from natural disasters than other terrifying things that happen, like being involved in a terrorist attack or like being physically attacked. So that's sort of good news. When we are looking for good news in all this, that's sort of good news in terms of bad traumatic events. What's been really tricky are the aftershocks. I mean, like this morning at 6 o'clock, you know, you just when you think things are settling down, you get another aftershock, and it's really difficult. And it brings about responses that I'm going to talk about, and it's also a reminder that it is ongoing. And just when you think it's going away, it comes back again. And that's been a real problem. And I don't think I ever realised that when there was an earthquake that you got all these aftershocks. You know, I was reading in the paper, there's been over 2,000 since February. And that's a lot of aftershocks. And I think other people outside of Christchurch don't really quite get that. So I think that's been really significant and something I hadn't really thought about before, but is really important, I think. I think it's also important to emphasise that this occurred 6 months after the September earthquake. So again, when we had been rebuilding ourselves and rebuilding the city and thinking Christchurch can do earthquakes, you know, we've managed this, we've managed a 7.1. And then this has come along and, I mean, no pun intended, but really shaken us, you know, that actually the things we had been looking forward to and counting on, actually we were back to square one again. And that's been very significant in what we've seen, I think, in people who are experiencing. There has, of course, been very significant loss of life, which was different from September, and that has impacted on people personally and as a community at large. There's been significant damage to property and infrastructure, and that has a huge effect on people, and I'm going to talk about the real concerns that people have about that. And there are very significant concerns that people have, financially, job-wise, sorting insurance, schools double bunking, upcoming cold season, very real concerns that aren't to be minimised and are all going to factor into all this. Right, so when we think about our responses, we talk a lot about the responses being normal. And what we mean by that is they are normal because of what we've experienced. So that doesn't mean they're minimal, and it doesn't mean they're not extremely unpleasant, because they are. But they are normal in terms of the body reacting to traumatic events. But I think it's really important that we don't minimise what people are going through, because it is still really difficult. And the responses that we're going through are because of the aftershock and the earthquake and the huge anxiety response that's brought about in us. Then it's dealing with the very real concerns and problems that we've all got to face. The money, the financial, the job security, they're very real, and they're very real stresses that we've all got to deal with. And then there has been a real shift in our way of life. You know, our whole landscape looks different. You know, my drive to work, I live out in Redcliffs, and the drive to work is past boarded up buildings, down potholes. I feel like I've driven in a PlayStation game just to get to work, you know, avoiding things and cones. It's all really different than it was before. So when we're thinking about common reactions to very frightening events like the earthquake, the common reactions are because our body is hardwired to respond to those situations. And it responds like that because it needs to get out of situations quickly, without thinking, but to just remove yourself from the situation and get somewhere safe. So your heart rate does go up, your breathing does go up, your blood pumps to your muscles so you can get out of situations. You're constantly on edge trying to work out, is it safe, can I do this? You're not sleeping very well because you're on edge, just listening out for, is that another one coming, do I need to do something? So it's normal, and it's why we as a species survive. Animals do it as well, but it results, when it goes on, in very unpleasant reactions, really. And these are ones that I can probably tick every single one of those, apart from I haven't had any past traumatic memories, but feeling on edge, tense, irritable, snappy, reactions being triggered by aftershocks, obviously, but other things, you know, when a lorry drives past and the ground moves, everyone, well, I certainly jump. And I was actually at a meeting in Dunedin, and we were sitting around a table and a bus drove past, and you could tell anyone from Christchurch just went like that, and everyone else was looking at you going, what are you doing? You know, and you just have no response over it, you just jump. That's this being very easily startled by things. So it's not just movement, it's not just the ground shaking. Sometimes for some people it's the sounds that can trigger things for them. Or it can be things that happened when it happened. So there might have been things that smashed and there was a specific smell, or something like that. But most commonly it's the ground, I think. And when that moves, people react. We're constantly hyper aroused, so kind of you can feel yourself tensed up. You're almost preparing yourself to run, although you're not meaning to, but you can't stop yourself doing that. Sleep is disturbed, so we're sleeping really quite lightly, waking with small noises, and that's sort of survival-ish, but it's been going on for so long, it's actually a bit of a pain now. We're getting swings in emotions, we're getting anxiety symptoms that we had with the earthquake and the aftershock, so your heart physically racing, you might get sweaty, you might get shaky, you might get short of breath. You might feel anxious when you're away from your family or from your home. Worrying about what can happen in the future or what could have happened, and just dwelling on that, which isn't particularly helpful, because the more you think like that, it actually doesn't stop anything happening. It just gets you stuck into a what-if scenario, which generally isn't very helpful. Feeling detached and numb, and that was probably more prominent in those first few weeks. I mean, I look back on that and it was all a bit of a blur and a bit of a haze, and you're just not quite there. Feeling exhausted. Now that's a combination of being constantly on edge, constantly hyper-aroused, and not sleeping, and the kids not sleeping. It's a whole package. But I think it's certainly a big feature, and it's more prominent now. I think as time has gone on, I think people are getting really, really tired. People who've had past traumatic events happen to them may get a re-triggering of those past memories as well, which can also complicate things. In children, the most common complaint is sleep disturbance. So children who've gone into their parents' beds and it's been very difficult to get them back out. And that's also a big factor in adults getting really tired as well. Children becoming more clingy or kind of regressing to previous things they've done. So, you know, maybe wetting the bed or something like that. Just sort of going backwards a bit. Getting headaches or stomach aches. Avoiding places that remind them of where they were at the earthquake or the aftershocks. But probably the biggest problem that we're seeing at the moment is sleep disturbance, I would say, in children. Right, the other issues, very real issues, the very real financial concerns, the very real damage to property and businesses, and the uncertainty about when they're going to improve. Dealing with EQC and insurance and how long it takes and how difficult it is. Time pressures, everything takes so much longer. You know, driving across town, you knew how long it took, and now you don't know whether you're going on a detour or whether there's going to be a traffic jam, and it all factors into making life just more difficult. Relationships becoming more strained because of all that, you know, and all these pressures, and getting more irritable and more snappy, and our partners at home are the ones that get it. Right, and in addition, thinking about us working, particularly when we're dealing with the public, in whatever role that is we're working long hours often. There's higher workload. We're seeing people often in distress, and that's hard. You know, it's very draining when you're seeing people upset or angry, and we're getting a lot of that. We've also had lots of changes to work environment. Where I'm talking now, that's been relocated. My building in the Anxiety Disorders Unit is on, or was in Latimer Square. Well, it is on Latimer Square, but we just can't get into it, and we don't know whether we will be able to. So we're relocated. Everything's difficult. You haven't got all the things you're used to. You haven't got a desk. You haven't got a computer. It all makes things very difficult. And then we've got all the general disruption in our daily lives. So dealing with children, different school hours, all the financial stuff, and all those difficulties on top of everything else. And in addition, we often don't like to admit we've got difficulties. We don't like to let the team down. We need to be there for other people, and particularly in helping professions, we're particularly bad at looking after ourselves and instead putting the client first. And that's a bit of a pattern. It makes us good as clinicians, but has some potentially damaging effects for us if we don't look after ourselves.